Channel Sports Central will be going over a college football game preview and prediction on a game coming up in the Big Ten in Week 14, and this is going to be between the Nebraska Cornhuskers and the Purdue Boilermakers, two teams of which that have struggled in the Big Ten West this season, and they've struggled down the stretch in general. And if you look at Purdue here, they started out 2-0, and things were looking great for the Boilermakers in the first couple of weeks of the season, but ever since, they haven't won since October 31st, and they are now 2-3 on the season, so they're hoping to break a 3-game losing streak here. You know, for Nebraska, they're 1-4. Their only win on the season is to Penn State a couple of weeks ago. They lost to Iowa last week, and things are not looking very good for the Huskers either. But this could be a big win for them in trying to turn around what their team is right now. And same thing for Purdue. I mean, Purdue is still within reach of a bowl game, so this is going to be a very motivated Purdue team in this matchup as well. We're going over a full game preview and prediction on this one here today, starting out with their team trends. And of course, Nebraska once again lost to Iowa last week. 20-26 was the final score there. Brutal loss for Nebraska. Kind of looked like this team was going to get the win in the end over Iowa. I mean, they were driving down the field at last second, and it kind of looked like Nebraska was possibly going to pull a big upset there, but in the end, Nebraska ended up taking yet another loss. You know, for Purdue, they lost to Rutgers 30-37 was your final score there. So that was a bad loss for the Boilermakers too, considering Rutgers is probably the worst team in the Big Ten. So, yeah, for Purdue, that was a bad loss there as well. But for the winning streaks, both these teams, Nebraska is 1-4, 2-game losing streak, and then Purdue is 2-3 with a 3-game losing streak. So both teams are trying to break losing streaks here in this matchup, which obviously, I mean, both teams are in the bottom 3 of the Big Ten West right now. So, I mean, really both teams are kind of out of contention to win the division at this point. But still, it's an important game for both teams considering 2021 as well. You want to have a good look going into the next season, which will be in 2021. And, of course, I mean, at this point in the season, once again, there's not a whole lot at stake, especially for Nebraska. But, yeah, you don't want to go off on the season with a loss to Purdue, that's for sure. This game's to be on Saturday, December 5th, noon Eastern in West Lafayette, Indiana. Spread currently says Purdue by 2. ESPN FPI's got Purdue 56%, and the Vegas prediction is also going, all right, it's actually going with Nebraska here, 29-27 being the projected final score. So it's 2 against 3 for Purdue here. Nebraska's favored in 1 out of the 3, but I mean, it's kind of odd there to see the spread and the Vegas prediction disagreeing with each other. Usually the spread and the Vegas prediction will be the same or going for the same team, but in this situation it actually disagrees. But the spread is still very close in this one. I mean, a 2-point spread is pretty much a 50-50 chance in this matchup, which the ESPN FPI is also very close in this situation with a 56% chance of predicting towards Purdue in this game. Here's your stack comparison as well. Nebraska's got 21 points per game, 32 points allowed per game. Then they got 180 pass yards, 187 rush yards per game. And then for yards allowed, they got 219 passing and 204 rushing. And the first thing that I noticed right off the bat for Nebraska is their rush yards allowed per game. They got over 200 for that number, which is a little bit concerning right now considering, I mean, Nebraska's gotten better on defense, it seems like, this season, but it's just been the rush defense that's been so bad for Nebraska. Like, people have been able, or teams have been able to run over Nebraska no problem. That's been a big reason why Nebraska's lost 4 games up to this point. Like, we saw that out of Illinois. We saw that also out of Iowa last week. So that's been the big problem for the Huskers. But as far as it goes on the offensive side, I mean, it's been kind of a jumbled up mess on the offensive side for Nebraska. I mean, you got your top rusher being Luke McCaffrey right now with 360 yards and 3 touchdowns on the season, which is kind of crazy because Luke McCaffrey is actually the leader in passing as well with 455 yards, 1 touchdown, 5 interceptions on the season. So Luke McCaffrey's had a pretty rough season for the Huskers, but obviously you also got Adrian Martinez, who's been starting for the Huskers. So both quarterbacks have been splitting time. Adrian Martinez started last week against Iowa, which he had a pretty good game, actually. I think that was probably the best game out of any quarterback this season for the Huskers. So that's good news for this team. But Luke McCaffrey, I mean, I almost think he's more of a rushing type of player. I mean, if you look at the passing game for Nebraska, Adrian Martinez, it looks like he's more of a quarterback type of player in comparison to McCaffrey. But, I mean, who knows? I mean, this is a very interesting offense right now. As for Purdue, though, they got 2 quarterbacks also splitting time. You got O'Connell, of course, who's actually leading the team in passing yards as well right now, as he's got 916 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions on the season. So it's not been a terrible season out of O'Connell so far. But if you look at last week, when Purdue played Rutgers, they actually started Plummer at quarterback, which he had a pretty good game last week against Rutgers with 237 yards, 2 touchdowns. However, he did have an interception, but still, I mean, he was decently accurate, so that wasn't a terrible game out of him. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see which teams are starting which quarterbacks here in this game, because it's been kind of the same situation for both these teams so far this season with having two quarterbacks splitting time. But for the rushing game, Purdue does have a more defined running back with Horvath. He's had 82 carries for 420 yards and 2 touchdowns on the season. So it's not been a terrible season for the rushing game for Purdue. But as for Nebraska, I mean, if you look at this receiving core, they got Wan'Dale Robinson, who was a great player in 2019. He was a huge impact player for Nebraska. And the thing is that they really have not played him a whole lot in this season, which really has surprised me. I mean, he's a very talented player. I'm not sure why Nebraska's not throwing him as much as he should be. I mean, he should be getting a lot of action on the field right now, considering, I mean, I understand he's a short guy, but man, he's a pretty talented player. So it's been a big surprise to see him not get as much action. But Purdue has had Bell, who's been a great receiver for this team, 500 yards and 7 touchdowns on the season so far. Here's some key points for this one. Nebraska is trying to break a bad losing streak. Same thing with Purdue. Purdue's got a 3-game losing streak as well right now. So both teams are coming off of losing streaks. Purdue started well, but has regressed since. There's no doubt on that either. I mean, they beat Iowa at the beginning of the season, so that's a good win for them. They also beat Illinois, which Illinois beat up Nebraska a couple of weeks ago. But for Purdue, they have had 3 straight losses. They lost to Northwestern by a touchdown, lost to Minnesota by a field goal, and then to Rutgers by a touchdown as well. So they've had close games, but they've just been on the wrong end of the stick for all 3 of the games. For Nebraska, though, I mean, they've had a couple of close games. I mean, they were close to Iowa. I mean, that was a 6-point loss there against them. They beat Penn State by a touchdown. They lost to Illinois by a whopping 18 points. Terrible loss there for Nebraska. They also had a bad loss to Ohio State at the beginning of the season. And they also lost to Northwestern back on November 7th. So, I mean, for Nebraska, it's just been a rough go. And I mean, especially considering Nebraska really wanted to play this season, which, I mean, I totally give them credit for bringing the Big Ten back into action, because I think if Nebraska wasn't in the conference, we probably wouldn't be seeing the Big Ten playing right now. But, man, it's just been a rough season for the Huskers, and I wish them the best. But, man, yeah, this has been a rough season. But in the end, they're going to get their second win on Saturday. I've got Nebraska getting a win here, 27-24 being your final score. I think at halftime, 17-14 is going to be your score there. Purdue's going to lead it by a field goal. It's going to be a very close game throughout the first half. And especially in the second half, too. I think we see this game go back and forth, but Nebraska possibly gets a last-second field goal. They're going to win this one 27-24. It's going to be a very close game, but in the end, probably it's going to be 65% towards Nebraska. I just think the Huskers, I mean, if you look at the recruiting here, Nebraska's got a tremendous amount of upside in comparison to Purdue right now. I mean, Nebraska had a top 20 recruiting class from 2019 to 2020. I also think they had a top 20 recruiting class from 2018 to 19 too. So, I mean, if you look at that, Nebraska is really a talented team. They just have not been able to execute at all. That's been the main problem for them. But Nebraska's going to get the win here, 27-24. I've got the Huskers getting their second win on Saturday. Truly, I think Purdue definitely is going to be motivated here, and it's going to be a close one. But Nebraska, even though their bowl hopes are pretty much out the window by now, but for Purdue, once again, the thing is for Purdue, and the reason why we're going to see the Boilermakers so motivated here is because, I mean, they're on the verge of making a bowl game. I mean, most teams that are above 500 will be going to bowl games. And so for Purdue, they're kind of on the verge of that right now. And I definitely think that they're still capable of doing so. But you got to win this game against Nebraska here if you're the Boilermakers. So it's pretty much a must-win game for Purdue here. But for Nebraska, in their case, I mean, Nebraska's really got nothing to lose at this point. So they're probably going to go all out and try to get a big win here, which I think they do get one in the end. But let me know your thoughts and comments below on this one. Let me know your score predictions, all of that down in the comments below. Crucial game for both these teams. But yeah, then again, thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed this preview, slap a like on it, subscribe as well, as it really helps out the channel, and I really appreciate that. But as always, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you on the next one.